When you criticize the president, that's not free speech? Huh? Well, that's what President Trump says. Trump is on the attack, and the media is enemy number one. Welcome to the Reason Roundtable. This is your libertarian review of politics and culture from the editors of Reason magazine. I am your host, Peter Suderman, and today I am joined by my illustrious colleagues, Katherine Mangu-Ward, Matt Welch, and Nick Gillespie. Happy Monday and happy Negroni Week. Except to journalists and writers who want to criticize President Trump. So here's what Trump told reporters at the White House. When 97% of the stories are bad about a person, it's no longer free speech. This is what the president is saying. Katherine, I am not a First Amendment lawyer, but I don't think that's how free speech works.
No, it's the opposite. I regret to inform you. The whole point of the First Amendment, it has a lot of excellent side effects, but the whole point of the First Amendment was very specifically to protect our right to criticize our politicians. And there's lots to criticize. So sometimes it might even be 97%.
Okay, so this comes on the heels of a week or so of attacks on free speech here. Trump's FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, bullied ABC into suspending the late-night host Jimmy Kimmel after Kimmel linked Charlie Kirk's assassin to MAGA. Trump applauded that move, said that other late-night hosts might be next. There wasn't even a pretext that those other late-night hosts had said something inaccurate or inoffensive. You have senior White House official Stephen Miller proposing a crackdown on the radical left. He says represents a vast domestic terror movement, which may be a pretext for legal action. Attorney General Pam Bondi said she would be on the lookout for leftist hate speech to prosecute. She did walk that back, to be fair, after some criticism from the right. It was correctly saying that the hate speech isn't a legal standard. And then over the weekend, Trump posted a message on Truth Social saying that Bondi was not prosecuting his enemies swiftly enough. That wasn't targeting the media, but basically saying that the DOJ should be going after people who have said mean stuff about Donald Trump. And then, for good measure, Defense Secretary, or I guess the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, posted new rules for journalists covering the Pentagon, which include requiring reporters to sign a pledge not to gather any information that is not officially authorized. And that includes unclassified reports, right? So it's basically a pledge that says you're not going to print anything unless you have gotten permission from your government overseers first. Nick, it just seems to me like this was the week that Trump decided to declare war on the press, even more so than before.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, he turned it up from 10 to 11, so it's kind of hard to see a difference. But what is being revealed consistently throughout all of the actors in the government is an absolute, constant attack on anybody who criticizes them for any reason. I take more seriously the actual actions of people like Brendan Carr, who, went after ABC and Disney, has talked about other people being bad. There is no question that having the FCC chair, start saying these companies that run these places better start doing something about speech like Jimmy Kimmel or else. That is, there's no way getting around it. It is an attack on speech. What also bothers me, the two other things that bother me, is that Trump's kind of MAGA megaphones in the discourse, people like Chris Rufo or Benny Johnson, who was the idiot podcaster who had Brendan Carr on, they are, cheering this on constantly. So it's not, what is different than maybe in 2016 or 2020 is that the government is not only doing what it's doing, but the media landscape has shifted where you can have a real amen corner constantly echoing and pushing all of this stuff through in a way that makes it ultimately possibly more effective. So very disturbed by that.
It's worth thinking that about the difference between now and 2017. Trump said the exact same thing in 2017. It created a whole news cycle. We wrote about it at the time. I wrote about it at the time, saying that these people who are criticizing me should have their broadcast licenses reviewed. Back then, that was very, very controversial. And a lot of people said a lot of oh, gosh, you can't do that and say that. This is who Trump has always been. A big difference was that the chair of the FCC then was Ajit Pai, who is a libertarian leading conservative or conservative leading libertarian, something in there. And he said
he just drinks out of a big Reese's cup.
Yeah, he's got
That's
some.
like his primary affiliation.
We all have some issues, Nick, with our personal hygiene, but
it's filled with cinnamon whiskey.
He said that this goes against both our legal and cultural traditions in America, and we won't be doing that. The end. What has changed is that now we have people like Brendan Carr, who used to mouth some free speech sounding like stuff when he was still on the FCC, but in the minority, and Joe Biden was going on a censorious rampage in his presidency. What has changed is that people, the Republican Party and the people that Trump appoints, and a whole bunch of people that Nick was referring to in the media ecosystem on the conservative side, have become pliant, and they will go towards where the power is going, where it is being wielded, and they do not have, most of them, there are a few exceptions. Senator Ted Cruz, to my surprise, criticized this, and Rand Paul, lesser to my surprise, criticized this too. But for the most part, it's the culture around Trump that has changed, and we should be very, very worried about that. And he's going to just keep pushing until he hits a wall.
Just to button that up, too, on the left, there is the problem of, or rather, it's not the problem, but now you have people, most notably probably Hillary Clinton talking about, where is this coming from?
Jesus
the idea
Christ.
that people in the government are going to start dictating, speech codes and things like that. And this is the conversation we've been having endlessly for, going on 2 decades now, where it's like, well, this team did it when they were in power and they suck, but that means we get to do it. And screw you if you don't go along with that. This turnabout is fair play stuff has got to go, because we need to reach a different point where we're going forward actually defending free speech and free expression.
Unfortunately, Ted Cruz has once again reawakened my against my will secret belief that Ted Cruz might be good. And I genuinely don't know where it comes from. I've talked about it on this podcast before. Like, I know all the bad things he's done. Please do not email me and remind me of all the bad things that Ted Cruz has done, because believe you me, I know. But then he does.
Can I just send you the Reason articles?
Well, just search his name on our site and reread those to remind myself. But this is not going to be without cost for Ted Cruz to have been the guy who said this thing in this moment. And it's a very important thing to say.
Yeah, the Cruz quote was, if the government gets in the business of saying, we don't like what you, the media, have said, we're going to ban you from the airwaves if you don't say what we like, that will end up bad for conservatives. And he's making the right case here, which is you don't give the president this power, because it will be turned back against you.
Right. And note who he's criticizing here. It is not President Trump, who absolutely believes in this. It is, someone who works for Trump and is trying to do Trump impersonations badly all the time, went and stepped on his own tie. And this is similar to last week. Not everyone, but many people on the conservative right and even MAGA universe criticized Pam Bondi for her hate speech gaffe, which is very much of a Kinsley gaffe. Go ahead and Wikipedia that one up. But it's safe for Republicans to criticize the deputies to Trump, maybe not even Stephen Miller, but certainly other people. But they're still absolutely gutless when it comes to Trump itself, with very few exceptions.
So you don't have any hope that this Republican pushback on Bondi, which was correct, basically said hate speech is not a legal standard, you can't prosecute it. And then you've got 2 prominent senators, Rand Paul and Ted Cruz, who are saying this is wrong in no uncertain terms. That doesn't give you any hope, Matt Welch, that there is a kind of going to be a Republican pushback here and that they won't let this go too far.
2 people so far. I don't know if based Mike Lee has weighed in just yet. I think the default should be do not trust politicians with speech. I mean, the fact that Hillary Clinton is out there waving the banner of free speech, arguably the most censorious Democrat of our last 35 years of national life, is out there saying that.
In
What's
Reason
that?
about this? Was there a cover story in Reason about this?
There might have been when she was running for president. Don't depend on politicians. How many times has Catherine got to say it to you?
This is the upside is that it is so blatantly stupid, and it goes against even Trump. One of his very first executive orders was saying, the government can't jawbone people, and the government shouldn't be dictating speech. So the hypocrisy at a certain point, especially as Trump becomes less and less popular, and like basically across every issue, his approval ratings are tanking. The midterms are coming up. The number of people who get their primary entertainment over the air, where the FCC actually has some ability to regulate content or lean on people, is shrinking. We will come to a point where people are like, why would we treat, print media, cable news, and other things that are not broadcast differently, fundamentally differently than other forms of speech? Because it's all speech to us. Trump himself was against this. Everybody recognizes the way the Biden administration leaned on social media platforms, et cetera, that this is bad. For me, I think it's, well, here's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the hypocrisy on display is enough where I think the large, the 80% of Americans who are not idiots on one far side of the aisle or the other might come to a point where it's like, okay, drop all this.
Okay, so Matt and I talked a little bit about the kind of conservative argument in favor of Trump and the FCC pushing Kimmel off the airwaves last week. But I want to get Nick and Katherine just to weigh in really quick here, because we are still seeing this. Over the weekend, I'm seeing Trump defenders, people on the right, making the argument that, look, it doesn't matter what Brendan Carr told Benny Johnson. This was a private action that his employers fired him, or I should say his employers indefinitely suspended him. That was his boss, not the government doing that. That's not censorship. Katherine, what do you say?
I mean, I think this is exactly the same thing that these same people lost their minds about during COVID, but in reverse. It's, this term jawboning is not really catching on, and it's a shame because it's a much needed term. Like this kind of behind closed doors government pressure on private actors to do what is superficially a private solution to undesirable behavior. And I think, I want to be clear, like, I blame the government actors. I always blame the government actors, but I do think it is worth noting and paying attention to when the private actors are maybe not happy to go along, but like they're differentially willing to go along. And I think it's important for us to celebrate the ones that are unwilling to go along. But this is it's just through the looking glass. It's just exactly the mirror image of the COVID speech suppression stuff. It's exactly the mirror image of the
So there is one difference. And I want to ask Nick about this just before you weigh in here, because the other argument you hear is, look, these folks don't have a right to say stuff that is offensive and inaccurate on the public airwaves because of the public interest standard. They're essentially renting space from the public, and they have a public obligation, a duty as a result. And so this is meaningfully different than when the Biden administration, say, leaned on Facebook.
It is not. I mean, because the FCC does, in the public interest, can't say, Jimmy Kimmel made a mistake and then mocked the president in a very clever way. This is the clip that is problematic. That does not mean that the FCC gets to, sync a merger between Nexstar, a station ownership group, with another one, or that ABC and Disney need to fire Jimmy Kimmel, which is exactly what Brendan Carr said. If that they don't shape up, then there's going to be more work for the FCC to do. What is different about the COVID era stuff is that was going on mostly in private and behind closed doors. This isn't job boning. I don't, is it job breaking? Is it punch in the face? Is it open threats?
I mean, at that point,
this is fundamentally different. And it has nothing to do with the purview of the FCC. And to the extent that it does, let's refer back to Tom Hazlett, longtime contributing editor, former FCC chief economist, author of the 2017 mega classic, The Political Spectrum. His December 2024 Reason article abolished the FCC. At this point in history, there is no reason for the FCC to exist as it does. It should have sold off all the spectrum a long time ago, and then you could have a GS1 part-time clerk, negotiate any kind of spectrum difficulty, allocation or interference claims that come out of that. So it's fundamentally different.
I don't know about you guys. I'm getting a little tired of the The cocktail party, I guess you were right, grudging, I guess you were right, that keeps coming my way on this type of thing. Like, I saw some
Wait,
people.
You're tired of the cocktail parties?
I'm tired of
yeah,
this.
Maybe you
this
should not drink as much.
particular interaction in which, I like saw some people last night for dinner, and it was this conversation of like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess you guys have been saying for a while to get rid of the FCC. That sure would have prevented some of this. And it's like, good on you for being consistent, even when everyone treated you like a lunatic. And it's like, well, thanks for that now, but like, will you learn any lessons, my friends? Like, listen.
I thought you were going to say, "Will you love me in the morning?"
Yeah.
In the morning after the FCC is over. I wrote a piece for the Free Press called "Abolish the FCC," which leans heavily both on Hazlett's article as well as a 2017 interview that I did with him. And I have been getting, Katherine, on social media, a different version of this. It's like, where were you when the Biden administration was doing this, or Obama?
I guess
and
I
it's
just
like
consider
fuck
that background
you,
noise.
You lazy piece of shit. Googled reason.com and net neutrality, for instance. I'm happy to see people starting to be like, oh yeah, we finally get it, because this is, we got to get off this, going from one extreme to another doesn't move anything forward. It's a compulsion and repetition of the worst aspects of late capitalism. To be quite honest.
I can recall with fondness where I was 2 years ago, which was on CNN, absolutely outnumbered 5 or 6 to 1, sitting next to a bunch of journalists who couldn't believe that I didn't support the Biden administration cracking down on misinformation on social media. This is in the wake of the Murphy versus Missouri court proceedings, which is what we were talking about. And what I said at that time was, you are reacting, you're governing. Donald Trump is running for president again. He's this person, and this is how you guys are going to respond, by giving people more power in the government to openly, not just behind closed doors, to go up Jim Psaki with a dirty dozen every day and saying Spotify needs to do more against Joe Rogan and all of this. This was happening in the open and with a cheerleading squad among journalists. If anyone's coming to me with that right now, I'm not having it. But I'm also not having the version of, you're just, you libertarians, you don't matter, you don't have any power, and we need to smash the mouth of the left. This is will to power stuff. Right now, MAGA is embracing the Elizabeth Warren agenda for approving mergers, especially if it's media mergers, and they're supporting the Ralph Nader and Robert McChesney, the late Robert McChesney's view on the FCC, which is that they're the public airwaves and we must protect them. My dudes, you don't mean it. You honestly don't mean it, because I know what's going to happen when you're out of power, and you're going to be singing another tune.
I actually, on the is this being done in public or is this being done behind closed doors question, do we have a consensus about whether that Trump message to Bondi on Truth Social was supposed to be a DM?
Right. Okay. Just for people who did not spend their weekend on Twitter, for one thing, congratulations, and for another, Donald Trump posted a message on Truth Social that some people suggested was a DM to AG Pam Bondi, basically saying, you have not done enough to go after my enemies. They came after me. We are losing credibility, or something like that. You have to go after them harder and faster and right now.
I genuinely don't know. I am asking with an open sense of inquiry, because on the one hand, this is maybe the kind of thing that Trump would just say out loud in any crowd, and so he wouldn't feel the need to say it privately. And on the other hand, all love and due respect to some of the older people that I correspond with on the internets, but that particular mistake is very common, of like, oh, I thought I was DMing this to you and I'm tweeting it or slacking it.
If his main mode of communication with Pam Bondi are Truth Social DMs, then he's in Joe Biden territory. I also think in his private messages, usually they're in the shape of a young woman, and he signs in the pubic area.
That's true.
Just from a forensic analysis.
He denies
a quick forensic
that was
analysis.
him. All right, so I want to finish this off by asking one more question actually to Matt Welch, because there's this other conversation that is happening as part of this in which the lefties are worrying about legacy media, social media that they say are increasingly controlled by right-wing or at least Trump-friendly billionaire owners, right? So we've had the big Paramount Skydance merger that gave David Ellison control of CBS News, and he might be purchasing the Free Press. There's been a bunch of reports about that, which might mean a role for Barry Weiss of the Free Press at CBS News. And then just this weekend...
Also, by the way, China and Qatar, which have stakes in Skydance. So
Red China.
It's very complicated. And just this weekend, Trump said that the Murdochs and Larry Ellison, who is David's father, are likely to end up in control of a U.S. version of TikTok. That deal isn't done yet. But it does seem like there is a big shift here, Matt, just in the media, in ownership, kind of in the vibes of what is going on in journalism right now. Do you think there is any reason to be concerned about what's happening or the way that it is happening?
It's the way. I don't care who owns the media. The media is shrinking no matter how you look at it. It's collapsed by 80% across most measures that matter in terms of the institutional media companies. And ownership doesn't really matter at all. What matters is, did Trump or anyone in the government put a thumb on the scale to decide who is going to be owning what and why? Is he, for instance, is the administration, as the price of approving Skydance, saying that you have to appoint an ombudsman to be checking out ideological content? That happened, people. That's awful. That is awful.
And that was
the government has no
after
business.
They paid a $16 million settlement that was widely viewed as basically a payoff to get the merger through.
Right. So that is what I'm worried about, not the effects of having owner X. Owner X is going to probably lose money no matter what, and whatever the owner owns is going to have less effect. This is going to be a problem for people who make their entire sort of living and their ideological base on hating the media when the media has zero power. But I'm sure the Republicans will figure out a way to do something with that. And to the friends on the left who are saying, like, this is bad and we should think about it, what tools did you give the administration? You have been talking about media monopoly inaccurately for 35 years, 40 years, and you've wanted there to be an FTC aggressively going after media ownership. Now Trump is picking up that and saying, cool. That's a fun tool. There's a lesson there, and we continue to be a little bit lonely in the wilderness trying to teach it.
Yeah, but it's welcome into the clearing. We got a big bonfire going, and it's going to give off heat and light.
On the money-losing front for media ownership, I heard a media investor and friend of this podcast recently just was like, "Hey, I know how to make a small fortune in media. You start with a large fortune," and it's true. It's so true. All right, we gotta move on here. But first, I have a question for you. Do you like great debates? Then check out the next Reason Versus, a debate series that pits Reason versus other folks in a battle of big ideas. On October 2nd, that is next week, Reason is taking on National Review. The resolution, mass immigration is good for America. This is going to be the debate your Reason friends Katherine Mangu-Ward and Alex Nauresta think mass immigration is good for America. Rich Lowry and Ramesh Ponnuru of National Review are going to argue that it isn't. I'll be the moderator. This debate will be held at Hook Hall here in Washington, D.C. on Thursday, October 2nd. For more information, go to reason.com/events. We hope to see you there. All right, so sources say that Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, took $50,000 in cash from undercover FBI agents at a Cava in Washington, D.C. It's a Mediterranean fast food chain. That's kind of a hell of a find in your garlicky chicken shawarma bowl. Cash was handed over as part of a federal sting operation and is said to have been a bribe to facilitate government contracts. No charges were filed. The matter has been closed. Kash Patel says the matter originated under the previous administration and was subjected to a full review by FBI agents and the Justice Department prosecutors. They found no credible evidence of any criminal wrongdoing. The White House says this was a blatantly political investigation. Basically, the Trump administration's position is, come on, that was the Biden administration. Who cares? So, Nick, is this something libertarians should care about?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Credible reports of some kind of bribe or some type of pay for play for a major government official yeah, we should care about it. Doesn't mean it's happened. Tom Homan should be kicked out of office just based on his basic policy and comportment with it, which is several clicks shy of being actually human. If you follow him, he was the architect of the family separation policy during the first Trump administration, which is, I talked to two documentarians who reported on that for the recent interview, which is a stunning act of just political horror that had no clear author, but it's Tom Homan who was behind it all. He was implementing it until he got kicked out. So people should care about this. It's also clear, the FBI is a political entity. The Department of Justice is a political entity. And when you lose power, you oftentimes lose a lot of your investigations, too.
So the other thing that happened on the immigration front last week was that Trump announced a new $100,000 fee on visas for skilled workers, the H-1B visas. Katherine, do you think, what do you think of that? Like, is that a good policy, right? Is that, going to make things better for American workers?
It's going to make things bad for me personally. So I will just start there with Reason would like to hire the best person for the job when we have a job that we need performed. And sometimes the best person for the job is not a person who, through the turn of fate, was born in the United States. And the H-1B visa program was how we did that. And we don't have $100,000 to apply for an H-1B visa. We are a nonprofit. And it is really disheartening, really a bummer to just know that there are really talented journalists out there that we're going to struggle to hire, or maybe simply not be able to hire, depending on whether anyone decides this policy was done in a legally correct way. I also think it's masks continually being taken off, I understand. But
although the ICE agents are running around with the masks on.
With the ICE agents, but masks off on every conservative who has said a million times, well, of course, I'm in favor of legal immigration. It's just these illegals. This is the least controversial form of legal immigration. It is just high-skilled people coming in for jobs that are already waiting for them. They are not committers of crimes. They are not a drain on our entitlement system. Yes, there has been a little back and forth kerfuffle about the H-1Bs specifically in the Trump administration, but by and large, these have been the least controversial visas. And so to turn them into a revenue center at the expense of freedom of movement just feels like I don't believe you anymore that you like legal immigration, actually.
These immigrants come and make America a better, stronger, more economically productive place. There's an NBER study that is going around economics Twitter and immigration restriction Twitter that basically finds that more skilled workers, that when you companies that get more skilled workers through the H-1B visa lottery program do significantly better, or startups, I should say. They're much more likely to exit, to have bigger IPOs, right, to sort of end up being these economic powerhouses. The argument here is that there are more high-skilled workers outside of the United States, right? If you limit yourself to the United States, the pool of workers here, that is just going to be a smaller pool of high-skilled workers. And it just seems crazy to me that if you are an America First president, an America First partisan, that you're actually, all those other countries, they get to keep their best workers. We don't want them. No, bring them here. Let's make them part of our economy. Let's make America the place that they want. It is the place they want to do business. And what we're saying is, actually, you can't for reasons here.
The other thing, that econ Twitter has been sharing widely, and I hope ultimately effectively, is that when you reduce the ability of high-skilled workers to come here, it leads to more outsourcing. It doesn't mean that suddenly a bunch of Americans who are not the best people for that job are going to be hired. It just means that companies will outsource more. I'll also point out, the somewhat use whatever adjective you want for this irony. But Melania Trump, when she first came to the U.S., came in on an H-1B visa. And so we're saying, okay, fashion models, add $100,000 to the price tag of things like that. It's obscene and it's ridiculous. And as Catherine was saying, it reveals that people who say, I'm for legal immigration, I'm against illegal immigration, and then every time there's a moment where you can expand or maintain legal immigration, they're like, oh, you know what? We got to do this. We got to build the wall higher for legal immigrants. They're full of it. And we need to get away from this kind of zero-sum, immigration policy. The idea that people, particularly people who have jobs in hand, which is what you need for an H-1B visa, are somehow going to stress our system rather than add to it. The final thing I'll say about this is that, of course, like with all Trump's plan, because he's Tony Soprano, there is a provision in there where you can go and you can petition the executive branch for an exemption. So it's just it's another way of kissing the Godfather's ring. It's wrong. It's bad on every level, from deontological reasons to just basic efficiency reasons. This is stupid, bad, awful.
Matt Welch, I want to bring you in here because you've talked a lot about the Trump administration's corruption, about how unseemly all of this stuff with the Bitcoin, with the hotels in the first administration, with the dinners, right? Like how incredibly unseemly and the level, not just the level, the constancy of the corruption in the Trump administration, it gets to you. And I want to see if you can connect the H-1B visa thing, that the exemptions part of it that Nick just talked about, with Tom Homan taking that bag of cash. Because it seems like Tom Homan is just taking money for, like, the reports are, and again, these are alleged, it's not official, right? But the reports are Tom Homan took a bag of cash to facilitate government contracts. And now what we are seeing is that Trump,
a restaurant that does not even serve American cuisine,
had a Mediterranean restaurant that almost certainly has an immigrant worker or two at some of those chains.
Or a pizza place.
And then you have the Trump administration setting up this immigration fee system that they say, oh, this is going to, boost things for American workers. But there is this carve out where you can get a special favor based on what criteria? I have absolutely no idea. I suspect that criteria is you've got a buddy in the Trump administration. It just sort of seems like there is corruption that has run through this whole system all the way through, and that it is getting worse under Trump.
In fairness to Tom Homan, $50,000 in bag in cash is not what it used to be. $50,000 cash in a bag was also part of the ab scam scandal, which Nick remembers fondly, being New Jersey centric.
And you nowadays you have to pay for your own bag, so like that's a nickel, 20 cents off the top.
Two,
right?
like $50,000 in 1978 is $250,000 now. So Tom Homan, is working cheap, is what I'm hearing from all of this, based in currency valuations. One reason why the Tom Homan thing might not go very far, it's visceral in the way that, like, Bobby Menendez's gold bricks were visceral. Do we have a constitutional amendment, Nick, where we just sort of ban New Jersey people from having government jobs? Is that
it's the crossroads of the revolution, Matt? It's the most important state. We wouldn't have in America without it. But
it was a civil war.
You got to kind of like Menendez he's the last American legislator who really believed in the gold standard, Matt. Give him that.
That's tough news for the situation, wanting to become the head of the Department of Interior.
Trump held a dinner for 220 of his very, very closest people who invest in his meme coin in Washington, I think in May. And the price of doing that was he had to buy his meme coin, and it generated $147 million worth of sale. So like $50,000 in a bag, $50,000 in a bag to a guy who didn't, have a job yet. And it wasn't really clear where that was going. Like, I don't know if he would be successfully prosecutable, honestly, given the standards that we have for prosecuting public figures. And as Nick alluded to, like, that's, this is we're in an era of absolutely plummeted trust of institutions like the FBI, and the FBI has done a lot of setups for people over the years, and sort of inventing,
including ab scam.
Although, so like, it's the blatancy of the $50,000 in cash that people will be looking to, but how much money has Trump made selling Trump Bibles as president? Trump gold watches, meme coins.
The gold spray painted sneakers,
and donate to his favorite causes, and your federal conviction might go away. He's going to law firms and saying, well, you're not going to be able to enter a federal building at all. And just federal buildings sometimes include courts, from what I understand. You can't enter a federal building at all unless you sign this thing that includes you doing a whole bunch of pro bono work for Republican causes. I mean, the corruption is out front everywhere. So $50,000 in a bag isn't going to really move the needle. And it's just an ongoing interesting thing to observe people pretending not to, or not at all pretending, just not caring that we're seeing such open corruption in the White House.
I do feel cash in a bag, though, at this point just becomes an IQ test because, as you just correctly noted, there are so many ways to buy influence that, first of all, like many of them meet existing tests for legality, right? Like we've built our system around all these different ways to buy influence legally. And it seems like it would be the hardest thing to self-justify. Like, I just got a contribution to my PAC. I got a table at the dinner. I got a in-kind whatever. I got a dinner, all of those things. I think you can kind of tell yourself a story about how this is the ordinary way of doing business. And, maybe it's not perfect, but it's the system we have. The bag of cash defies that. The bag of cash, it is impossible to tell yourself that you are the good guy when you are receiving a bag of cash. And so I guess I just ultimately have this feeling that this is like it's an "Are we the baddies" moment, right? Like surely he must have looked in the mirror and said, "Oh, I have a skull on my helmet. Like, am I the baddie?"
Wait, isn't Reason Magazine the magazine that defends cash transactions?
Yeah,
Can we publish Jerry Tuchili on how cash is awesome and
I mean,
what an all digital commerce world?
What percentage of politicians and elected officials and appointed officials do you think would pass the $50,000 in the kava bag test?
I think a lot.
Yeah.
Is that stupid?
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think a lot. Because they could just be like, write that $50,000 check to my reelection fund. Like, I don't know. Like,
now I'm curious, what kind was it? A paper grocery bag? And was it like fresh? Was it a one right off the shelf, where it's still got its creases, or is it like battered?
I think I can clearly envision this bag.
Could talk.
They kind of have like bougie bags at Kava. Like you get your little bowl, and it's like a flat bottomed with little handles. So it's I do feel like
is it compostable? I mean, on top of everything else, was this going to be an environmental issue down the road?
Let's get Christian Britschke, bags reporter, on this question. I think we're going to have to wait till next week for that one. Pull the bag out of a sea
turtle's nose, maybe. So
no plastic at
Kava. That's you have identified the real problem with it. It wasn't an environmentally friendly bag. They should have just cash itself. Yeah. Cash itself, man. Can you recycle that? I don't even know. All right, we gotta go here briefly. Pay a bill, and then we're going to come back with a listener question about our least libertarian beliefs. This is an advertisement from BetterHelp. Look, we all turn to some funny places for support. I sometimes talk to my dogs when I'm having trouble. They're big bull mastiffs, and they have these great eyes, and they're very cute, but they're not therapists. And the thing is, sometimes the person you talk to, sometimes the dog you talk to, isn't somebody who can actually give you really good advice. And for that, you might try to find your right match with BetterHelp. Look, we have all done something like this before. You talk to the barista at the coffee shop. You talk to a friend, a random stranger. You want to talk about relationships, about your anxiety, about depression, about other clinical issues, and they may not have the right answers. And so if you want someone who is a specialist, who is a professional, you can get guidance from a credentialed therapist online with BetterHelp. Look, there's a lot of benefits to something like Benefit. There's flexibility. It's completely online. You can pause your subscription whenever you need it. Switch therapists at any time with no extra cost. There's over 30,000 therapists. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, serves over 5 million people globally, and it is convenient. You can join a session with a therapist at the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. Plus, switch therapists at any time. So as the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of experience. Find the one with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/roundtable. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/roundtable. All right, our listener question this week comes from Kent Lassman of the Competitive Enterprise Institute, where I worked so many years ago, and just had yet another big Washington, D.C. shindig. Nick?
Oh, I was going to say he also swam the English Channel, didn't he? Which, to be quite honest, is a pretty big achievement.
All right, so Kent wants to know, what view do you hold that your colleagues believe is your least libertarian view? Catherine, if you hold a view, doesn't that make it, by definition, a libertarian view?
My official position is any view that I hold is the center of libertarian orthodoxy, and I shan't be hearing any dissent from that.
Work for William F. Buckley.
I think that if I am trying to answer this question, it almost certainly comes down to just places that libertarian orthodoxy is not clear. The thing that comes to mind actually is the federalism question, which looms very large with Trump and has loomed larger. The problem of, well, what if a locality does something that is like very obviously unlibertarian and then the state overrules that locality with a more pro-market or, free minds law? I find that one hard, and I ultimately side with the locality can do the unlibertarian thing, and that should be our default. I'm a localist in that way, but there are lots of libertarians who would disagree with me and say, listen, if you can pass a law that allows people in San Francisco to upzone, you should do it. And it doesn't really matter which government entity is the one doing so.
Matt Welch, are you defining yourself as a libertarian this week? And if so, what's your least libertarian view?
You're so snippy about that, Suderman. I just
don't know how to define
he's right. Matt
pretending
to be an economist-style liberal for decades.
It's been like 20 years.
I would not want to put words in Matt Welch's mouth about how he thinks of himself.
My least libertarian position is that heads of libertarian leading nonprofits in Washington, D.C. shouldn't be allowed to ask questions designed to make libertarians look awkward on reason in front of their donors.
No.
That's maybe my opening gambit. Where to begin with me? I'm a bag full of trouble. I hesitate to repeat what I have said on this podcast previously when responding to a similar query, which is that assisted suicide and euthanasia creep me out. I've just gotten myself so many emails by saying that. But probably if colleagues are made broader even than this podcast on reason, it's just that I think that NATO was a good thing back in the day, and that even in the wake of the wall collapsing, I think that Central European countries who had transitioned to democracy and rule of law and protection of minorities and the free market economy and all that kind of stuff, it made sense for them to try to look for security guarantee. We should have figured out a different way that wasn't NATO. But since that didn't happen, I understand why they wanted to do it. And I understand why NATO said yes, at least at the beginning of them. And then they said yes to a bunch of people who didn't deserve to be there. And that's too bad. The end.
Nick, what about you?
I would say on a continuing basis, it is that libertarians routinely vastly exaggerate the power of marginal tax rates to change human behavior. And that years ago, I wrote a piece, which I still occasionally get shit for, which was about how, what was it? It was
why you like to live in New York instead of Kansas?
Yeah. Thank you. But I'm trying to remember. There was, I think, the Mercatus Institute or Mercatus Center and Pacific Research Institute had done a bunch of things about, the cost of doing business in various places, which leads to the conclusion that, of course, all businesses would be based in Kansas because they had like the best business climate based on tax rates. And it's just, when Mike Lynch, who used to be our Washington correspondent a million years ago, did a great piece where he talked to Joel Slemrod, an economist at University of Michigan, who pointed out that, reducing tax rates from 70%, income tax rates from 70% to the high 30s made a huge difference. But the differences ultimately between 35% and 36 or 38% are not particularly big. They're not the thing that people make decisions on. And I think that holds true. And I think more broadly, the turn in libertarian thinking to a very economic-based model of all aspects of human behavior and human endeavor has been been a mistake. That we need to start thinking in ways that speak to the whole person rather than just, is moving 5 feet or 500 miles in order to save a little bit on taxes. Is that the thing that's driving change, or is it a much more complex set of human interactions?
Yeah, I would just point out that the question here is, what view do you hold that your colleagues believe is your least libertarian view?
Well, I don't speak to my colleagues much anymore, so,
Yeah. But if Kent wants to know what my colleagues think is my least libertarian view, he's going to have to ask my colleagues.
Can we take just a brief moment to say again, CEI is a delightful organization, Matt's grumpiness notwithstanding, and they've really done good work on this issue that is now the issue of the day, which is the overwhelming power of regulatory bodies to restrain and constrain and destroy human freedom. So now more than ever, CEI. Also, they threw a party that allowed me to see Stephanie Slade of Reason Magazine dressed kind of like Dorothy, because it was a Wizard of Oz themed gala. She looks cute with bows in her hair, and I want to thank Kent Lastman for that.
10,000 Commandments.
Yep.
I'll point out that as long as we're talking about CEI gala dinners, they also gave you all the opportunity to see me dressed as Fat Elvis and Fatter Elvis a couple of years ago when I emceed their Elvis-themed gala dinner.
And they allowed me the opportunity to buy a evening dress that was made of leather when I emceed the Game of Thrones.
Allowed you. Yeah, you needed permission for that.
They created the permission structure for that.
They
purchase.
did. And they hired me an armed guard dressed in fur. So I just really am never going to say anything bad about
So what
CEI.
is Peter? We're all colleagues of Peter.
That's
what
true.
do we think Peter's...
All right, what do you guys think? What's my least libertarian view?
I'm not going to say it, Peter, but you know what it is.
Oh, yeah. I like that. You're just
I have no idea.
The fact that you don't know will make it all the more powerful that Matt's you know what you did.
I learned from Candace Owens. Stay tuned at 8 o'clock. I'll reveal all.
I think the answer is that you don't like guns enough. I think that's the real answer.
Okay, so this is actually the sort of serious answer here is that I am a libertarian down the line on policy. And on the actual policies for a bunch of things, there's no gap between me and sort of the Reason or Cato or Mercatus worldview about a bunch of things. But there are places that are policy issues where I guess I feel a little bit culturally uncomfortable with some libertarian enthusiasms for particular kinds of vices, for particular kinds of sort of lifestyle choices that I don't find myself enthusiastic about. And one would be guns. Yes, I've shot guns. A bunch of my closest friends are gun owners and are constantly telling me about their sort of gun collection. So I do participate a little bit in a secondhand way in gun culture. And it's just not my favorite thing. And similarly, sports gambling. I just find myself somewhat uncomfortable with it. And that doesn't mean in any way that I want to regulate this stuff, that I want to sort of kind of have a narrow reading of the Second Amendment, nothing like that. In fact, the lesson of prohibition to me is when you don't like something, when you find something that maybe makes you uncomfortable, that you see, there are societal ill effects here. As I think you could make a case that there were societal ill effects from alcohol consumption before prohibition. It wasn't all just that everything was great and there were no problems at all. Many of the problems were overstated. Many of them were related to a kind of sort of quasi-racism or nativism, where it was sort of these immigrant drunks, right? And yet there were some issues, I think, with alcohol consumption before prohibition, and that didn't make prohibition a good idea at all. And so just because you're uncomfortable with something culturally, I mean, this is actually one of the things that I think is great about reason and great about libertarianism just generally, is that the idea here is like the central idea, or one of the central ideas is just because you have a personal aesthetic or cultural or lifestyle distaste for something does not in any way mean that therefore there should be a law. There shouldn't be a law. And there shouldn't be a law about guns. There shouldn't be a law about sports gambling, about any of that. And that's why I fit in at Reason and have no issues here, because on policy, I'm totally aligned. All right. That was a good way to end that, I think. You found out a little bit about me and how I feel about these things. Okay.
And
last week, President Trump
he's
said,
the one to shake down for money, because he's not packing heat.
An armed society is a polite society, and no one has to be polite to Peter.
School zone.
Except when I'm hanging out with my friends in Kentucky. Then there's guns within reach. So many guns. All right, we have to do one more topic here. We're going to talk about President Trump waging some sort of small-ish war thing. I don't even, what do you want to call this? Attacking gunboats carrying drugs, some from Venezuela. The U.S. has apparently attacked 4 of these alleged drug boats, killing more than a dozen people. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has condemned the strikes and said his country is going to defend itself against U.S. aggression. And Trump, in response, has ordered 7 warships carrying 4,500 troops to the waters off of Venezuela, and that includes 3 guided missile destroyers and at least 1 attack submarine. This is not a bunch of cruise boats. So my question, Catherine, is what kind of legal authority does the president have here? If he describes the targets as terrorists, does that make this legally acceptable in some way?
This is absolutely a great sort of object lesson in the every law that you pass to try and stop terrorism or reinforce national security will end up being used in the war on drugs. Or more specifically, in the service of stopping people from getting high or having sex, because that's how all our laws go. And I was under the impression that sending a whole bunch of warships was like a pretty classic thing you would do if it was a war. And I was further under the impression that Congress has a role here in the declaration of war, but I must be wrong. Surely I am mistaken.
I mean, Pete Hegseth is running the Department of War now. Doesn't that make it, when they do stuff, doesn't that make it kind of a war? All right. So speaking
it's a rebrand that is Cracker Barrel level in its misguidedness from
Nick,
Department of Defense.
This isn't the only situation where there's sort of escalating global conflict here, right? So there's other reports over the weekend saying Trump is pushing military officials to reacquire Bagram Air Force Base in Afghanistan from the Taliban. Taliban is basically saying no. Trump is saying, well, we're in negotiations. And when people ask, are you going to rule out Trump's on the ground? He says, I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say you're going to find out what I'll do if we can't get this back. It kind of seems like it's at least a possibility that we are going to end up with troops on the ground in Afghanistan again. Weren't we supposed to be done with that war?
Yes. And on Wednesday, by the way, on the Reason interview, I have a great conversation with the director of a new documentary called Bodyguard of Lies, which is all about how we got into Afghanistan, why we stayed, and how we kind of sort of got out in various ways. So I highly recommend that movie as well as that episode of the Reason interview. I think what I will just comment on here is 2 things. One is that Trump, unlike his predecessors, has kept us out of protracted military engagements. Bombing Iran, we're not exactly sure how successful that was, but it seems to be a one-off. Like, he's capable of doing that. He did that back in when he bombed Syria or launched missiles into Syria during his first term. He's not one of the great libertarian victories of the past 25 years has been people catching up to the idea that we're not good at long wars where we go in and do regime change and occupy forever and then eventually gift our enemies massive amounts of treasure and pull out. So there's that. But the other thing, and this I think is more pressing, when we do not have an active kind of foreign policy consensus or framework, all of these little things, any of them can blow up into a full-scale war very quickly. At its best, what you can say about American foreign policy in the Cold War or going back to the Roman Empire, they understood which places mattered and which didn't, and that governed decisions so that you didn't get pissed off at one thing or get dragged into something over a terribly small scale engagement and things like that. That's what worries me, is that Trump has no foreign policy. There is no foreign policy in Congress. There is no anything. And that means that any of these little things, that scratch one of Trump's momentary itches could really develop into something very big, very awful, very quickly.
I think that there's a qualitative difference with Venezuela in this case. The Trump administration, and especially Marco Rubio, who's been an interventionist his entire career, described as a neoconservative for a long time. Suddenly he's the secretary of everything, and he's making different types of noises about issues that he had very strong views on even 9 months ago. But one of the things that he has said in that process of changing is that America is no longer the unipower. We don't have a unipolar world anymore. But what you will see is more robust attention paid by America, but also by our kind of competitors and adversaries on their spheres of influence. What does Marco Rubio think our sphere of influence should be? It's the exact same as Teddy Roosevelt. It is the exact same thing as James Monroe. It is right around us. It's Cuba, it's Venezuela. Marco Rubio's family is from Cuba, although he's never visited, from what I understand. I think 7 gunboats by Venezuela is a tell, as is just like, we're going to bomb things. Their theory of the case is that Venezuela is a narco state, and so therefore they are funding all of this that's killing people, Americans in the street, and so we can just blow them up to smithereens. Just as, we could have had them turn around, but now we're just going to blow them up. I think that that Marco Rubio and the administration is very interested in regime change in Venezuela. And we will see what levers that they will pull to make that happen. But I think that we should assume that that is where they're going to go, because Marco Rubio has been talking about this his entire career, and it fits in very well with their theory of geopolitics as it stands right now.
I don't disagree with that. And J.D. Vance actually tweeted some weeks ago that, regime change can happen whenever Trump wants it to. Yes. So he's another guy who, came to prominence and came to kind of public office being a non-interventionist, singing a different tune, particularly in the New World sphere of influence. But this is my point, is that let's say Trump actually takes out the Maduro regime. Does that create a vacuum that America is going to fill, or do we, what happens? And this is problematic because, we know this from recent history. Like, when you topple a government, you don't really know what's going to happen next. And America has been profoundly terrible at managing regime change that it itself causes.
I just want to close this by bringing us back to the beginning, to our opening conversation, because one of the things that Stephen Miller said after Charlie Kirk's assassination, and after some of the ill-advised, inaccurate, and in some cases just flat-out awful remarks from people on the left about Charlie Kirk's assassination, one of the things that Stephen Miller said was that he wanted to crack down on the, quote, radical left, which he called a vast domestic terror movement. And when you define people as terrorists, that ends up justifying a whole lot of stuff that isn't really constitutional. And we are seeing that in the realm of speech. We are seeing that just all over politics. And we are seeing that in the Trump administration's dubious new, maybe a war against all of these narco-terrorist drug boats, because that is what Trump says, that this is justified because they are narco-terrorists. Well, when a terrorism designation justifies any action and says the Constitution no longer applies, this is the world that you get, and it's a bad one. All right, let's move on to our final segment, what you've been watching, consuming, otherwise enjoying in the cultural sphere. Catherine, what do you have for us?
I read Iris Murdoch's novel, The Sea, which was published in the 70s, I want to say, maybe 1980, and is a really, really it won the Booker Prize. It is a really, really fascinating novel of ideas. I would say for this podcast listeners, the best way to understand Iris Murdoch is if Ayn Rand was a Platonist and also an infinitely more subtle writer, you would
so
get
just not Ayn Rand.
This book. It is fundamentally about. It's the memoirs of a retired actor and director who is in a house by the sea, trying to make sense of his life. A variety of characters from his past show up in various guises. But it is fundamentally a novel about the fact that it is almost impossible to know the nature of reality and certainly impossible to know other people through the veil of our own narratives about ourselves and about the nature of the world. That feels useful and timely for a variety of reasons to me. And so if you want, a solid 450 pages of really excellently written musings about how incredibly hard it is to live in Plato's cave that are also kind of like an English country house farce, this book is for you. Iris Murdoch's The Sea. Nick
Gillespie?
If I may, I absolutely want to concur with Catherine about The Sea. I went through Iris Murdoch JAG in the late 1980s, and all of her work it just is worth reading. I mean, it's like from her, I think her first book is called A Severed Head or something, and you can see her develop as a writer and as a thinker. I mean, she was a dean at or a don at Oxford or Cambridge. It's really working on a very high level, but is a phenomenal writer. And there's tons of it. So it's you really, if you like that, there's a million more things like that. Really, really good. And in keeping with that high tone, my consumption this week has been the Charlie Sheen documentary series on Netflix, a.k.a. Charlie, directed by Andrew Renzi, who also did a very good documentary about a Pepsi Clear promotion, which ended up with a guy suing Pepsi to get his Harrier jet that he had actually won by getting enough tickets in order to claim that as his prize. But a.k.a. Charlie Sheen is a fantastic kind of document about a different the segue from old style celebrity where you're working within kind of the entertainment industry and you're a big movie star and a big TV star with tabloids, sensibilities, to something beyond that. Charlie Sheen is the Archaeopteryx of, Arcteryx or whatever. He's the transitional life form into a full-blown social media kind of fame and celebrity. And it is a really interesting kind of ride. It's mostly a direct-to-camera set of interviews with him. And he talks about, having AIDS. He talks about enjoying gay sex. He talks about a prodigious amount of drug abuse, not drug abuse in a way. I mean, obviously drug abuse, but drug use that would have killed an entire herd of elephants. And he also addresses the charges leveled against him by Corey Feldman that Charlie Sheen, had raped Corey Haim on the set of Lucas. So it's a real tour into the dark underbelly of American celebrity, popular culture of about the past 30 years, and what happens after that. It's fascinating, kind of about fame, where it leads, and who gets to keep it and who just gets forgotten. So I recommend a.k.a. Charlie.
Genuinely an absolutely parallel recommendation to mine. Truly, aging star of stage and screen grapples with his past misbehavior toward targets of his sexual interest and his inability to see clearly through the haze of his substance abuse and narcissism. It's the same. So maybe do these two together, actually.
There you go.
Speaking of American celebrities, Matt Welch. So glad you're not dead.
About Charlie Sheen is that when he was doing the Wild Thing guy in a Major League Baseball movie that I finally watched a couple of years ago, he legitimately threw in the high 80s. Nick.
Yep.
So he,
he was a baseball star at Santa Monica High. He was an excellent player.
I mean, if you can say that Santa Monica High had any kind of baseball team. However, last week I committed some magazinal infidelity, or maybe recon, by going to the Atlantic Ideas Festival for one event in New York City, because they had Ken Burns coming in to do a little teaser of his new American Revolution thing, which I'm not going to talk about. What I'm going to talk about instead is that as a throat clear for all of this, they had the best live poetry reading I've heard in many a year. It was John Lithgow, man of voices, came out and read Paul Revere's Ride by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. What I did not know about that poem, and he's just great. I mean, John Lithgow could read the phone book, I would be enraptured, but it's actually a very good and super interesting poem. Interesting in that Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor of The Atlantic, pointed out that this was published in The Atlantic in 1860, that the purposes of this poem were very much directed to, I'm going to pluck this person and these ideas, which is now faded from memory, and I'm going to use it as a rallying cry to get the North organized in its abolitionist war, because Longfellow was an abolitionist. In that process is going to abuse history, which he knew very well, but he's going to pick and choose to make Revere look like this. In that process, then, as I learned by a thing that I recommended previously, which is the History of the Americans podcast, special episode on Paul Revere suddenly becomes the only person in that midnight ride, which is a great William Dawes erasure, which I'm fine with because he's the direct descendant of Bill Schultz. But also it because we only think about Paul Revere in that context, we completely undersell his importance to the American Revolution in Boston, of which was vast and fascinating and great. And wonderful. But anyways, it was really great to see this reading of it. It's always interesting to see how we use contemporaneously history to solve our current problems. And in fact, after the showing of the snippets from the documentary, what were Jeffrey Goldberg's first questions to Ken Burns and Tom Hanks, who was there? It's all about like Trump. So people are plucking out your histories in order to try to solve your the temporal problems. It's fascinating, very rich text. And if I can find a video, I've been looking for it, of Lithgow reading it, we'll put it in the show notes. But so far, I haven't been able to find it.
Still waiting on Ken Burns's This One Stick documentary. It's going to happen. I'm very excited because you're going to tell me about it when it happens. All right, so it is Negroni Week. Finally, speaking of other publications, Negroni Week is the annual celebration of Negronis, one of the greatest cocktails, sponsored by Campari, which is a key ingredient in a Negroni, and the cocktail magazine Imbibe. And there's bars all over the country who are participating in this. You drink Negronis, and some of the money goes to charity. Drink for a good cause. That's great, but you can make Negronis at home. That's what I've been doing. I'm always living in Negroni Week, kind of. Negroni is just 3 ingredients. It's gin, it's sweet vermouth, and it's Campari. But then you can take that and you can turn it into a template. You can use it to make basically an infinite number of permutations of Negroni-like drinks. And so it's this wonderful kind of like almost Lego system for creating cocktails. And the cocktail itself, the 3 parts to it, right? You've got the gin, which is strong. It's botanical, right? It's the base. It's the foundation. And then that gin is kind of being argued with by the sweet vermouth, which is, sweet and mellow, right? It's a kind of wine, but there's a little bit of spice to it too. But it's gentle and it connects the gin with the Campari, which is bittersweet and strong and sort of feisty. And there's a kind of like you drink a Negroni and you see that there's a 3-act structure, just like a movie, but it's also, there's a love triangle. The Negroni is a love triangle. And every time you have a Negroni, every time you taste it, you think, this is a wonderful story. It's just like broadcast news, right? Where you've got like the two, Catherine, Catherine, what is that face? It's like the Negroni is like broadcast news.
It's the face of everyone listening to this right now.
I'm smiling, but I'm also crying. It's
Catherine,
sun shower review.
Catherine drinks Negronis because of me, is how I'm going to end this. It's a great drink, and this is a good week to try one out at home. There's so many different ways you can make a Negroni. I love them. It is one of the drinks that I make most often and that I have made most often throughout my life. And again, it's once you understand the idea of the Negroni, it's like a gateway to understanding the central idea for all other cocktails. So Negroni week, I enjoy Negronis. I enjoy talking about Negronis. I enjoy a celebration of Negronis. All right, folks, that is our show this week. Remember, you can come watch Reason Debate National Review about immigration in Washington, D.C. on October 2nd. You can check out all the details for the next Reason versus Debate at reason.com/events. As always, if you like this podcast, you can support us by going to reason.com/donate. That's reason.com/donate. Thank you so much for listening. The Reason Roundtable will return.